He is the Emerald Archer, a modern-day Robin Hood. For nearly 7 decades, he has fought against social injustice in comic books and on television. Like many of his contemporaries, the Green Arrow was born from a revolution in American entertainment.
America has not created many great art forms for the world. We gave the world jazz, and we did good on that one. But the other thing that we gave them was the American comic book. We gave them Superman, and that is a huge contribution. And with Superman comes not just an idea, but ideals. And with Superman comes Batman, and comes characters like Green Arrow.
Iconic heroes like Superman and Batman quickly became DC's marquee characters. Similar heroes emerged, hoping to capture comparable success. In issue 73 of 1941's More Fun comics, the green-clad Archer first appeared with his kid sidekick, Speedy. It didn't take X-ray vision to see that he was strikingly similar to one of DC's more popular characters.
Very similar in a lot of ways. Both guys who came from a lot of money, had some difficulty, then found themselves in becoming superheroes.
He's Robin Hood, he's a bit of Batman, he's a bit of this one, he's more of an amalgam of various different archetypes.
He was designed by George Papp, who was the artist, along with Mort Weisinger, the writer who created him. He looked like a frat boy portraying Robin Hood. You know, he's a clean-cut guy with a little cap on, and he had that look forever.
His gimmicks were even more limited than Batman's to arrows, but he had an arrow car and an arrow cave, and he was a millionaire, and he had a sidekick, and it was really kind of a little bit of a blatant emulation.
In spite of his similarities to Batman, Green Arrow's road to heroism took a very different path.
Oliver Queen was like this playboy millionaire with all this money and no social conscience whatsoever, and all he really cared about was drinking champagne out of girl slippers. And he's on a yacht one night, terrible storm, he gets knocked off.
Winds up on a deserted island and has to fend for himself.
He has to teach himself the rudimentary skills of archery and trapping and hunting just to be able to survive. A real sense it transforms him, and it makes him realize that it's about self-reliance, that you can't, if you got nothing else to fall back on, you've got to find the strength in yourself.
By the 1950s, a then-unknown Jack Kirby brought Green Arrow out of relative obscurity. Kirby would later become a titan in the comic book industry with his iconic action-packed style. His innate sense of adventure would forever leave its mark on the Green Arrow character.
He worked on Green Arrow for a long time. During the 50s, I think, he was the Green Arrow guy.
Kirby made Green Arrow the focus of several stories in DC's popular The Brave and the Bold. But despite his memorable run with the character, Green Arrow had yet to break free from the stigma of being Batman with a bow.
Green Arrow was a tabula rasa. There was nobody very much interested in him, and there was not a whole lot of continuity or backstory to be saddled with.
I think part of what was hurting Green Arrow was that he was comedy relief to a large degree. Having an arrow car and an arrow cave, it was just, he was walking a silly line.
One of Green Arrow's most defining traits was his arsenal of trick arrows. It seemed that no matter what the situation, he always had the perfect arrow for the job.
He had an arrow for everything. You know, if there was a fire, he's like, I have a fire extinguisher arrow, boom.
Among his eclectic quiver, there was one arrow that always packed a punch.
The boxing glove arrow.
I'm just simply going to go with the boxing glove.
It's hard not to love the boxing glove arrow just because it looks so damn goofy.
That was the big visual shtick for the 40s, boxing glove arrows.
It's so insane that you gotta love it. It's so out of there. It's like, what? I mean, everybody makes fun of the boxing glove, but it does its job, you know?
And it shows his humane side, that he doesn't want to really hurt anybody. He wants to just pop them with a boxing glove, that's pure Green Arrow.
How do you fire an arrow at somebody and it hit them and not wound them? Well, you do the boxing glove arrow. It just goes like this, and they go like that.
Like Batman's utility belt, whatever arrow he happened to need, he had with him.
I think the best trick is they actually fit in the quiver. I think that's the real trick. How do you get those things in there? What's the boxing glove doing in there?
I was thinking about developing a boxing glove arrow, and then I thought, come up with something a little fancier.
I like it because it's dumb.
With his unique abilities and clever array of arrows, Green Arrow was a natural choice for recruitment into DC's popular superhero team, the Justice League of America.
What Green Arrow brings to a group of superheroes is the human element.
Green Arrow, in a way, doesn't belong with the Justice League. He's sort of off the Justice League because he's a regular guy, doesn't have superpowers.
He's a guy who's in there and just doing things at the peak of, his own human skill. He is also sometimes the voice of humanity in the group. He does understand how this big stuff is going to affect John Q. Public.
In a Justice League full of guys who are very committed to global scale problems and cosmic level threats, he's the guy who says, okay, yeah, but we got to clean up our own backyard. We've got to deal with the street level crime too.
Through the 1960s, Green Arrow served as backup man in many Justice League stories, when journalist turned comic book writer Denny O'Neil revitalized the character with an edgier persona.
It was in the Justice League that I first had him go broke and lose his fortune, to take him a little further away from Batman.
In addition to his new attitude, Green Arrow was also given a makeover by artist Neil Adams.
Neil Adams revised the visual for a story written by Bob Haney and gave him a very macho look and a very unique look for comic books.
When Neil Adams came on the scene, he wanted him to look a little more swashbuckling, so he wanted to bring a little more pirate kind of look into it, and that's when the goatee came in. And that's when the vest with the crisscross pattern came in, and the long gloves. That's Neil. That's 100% Neil.
Why don't we put him in a leather jerkin, and why don't we give him a beard, and why don't we give him some character like Errol Flynn in Robin Hood?
When Neil Adams redesigned his costume, he really made the visual point that he was going to be something tougher and a little more important to the world.
In the early 70s, O'Neil was given the task of fixing a struggling series starring DC's other Emerald hero, the Green Lantern.
The assignment was do something with this. So I thought it was a chance to combine my background as a journalist and my concerns as a citizen and husband and father with what I did for a living. I thought of Green Lantern as the best cop who ever lived. So we needed somebody to represent the more anarchistic point of view.
That viewpoint came in the form of Green Arrow. O'Neil teamed up with Adams, and together they changed the character forever.
It was decided to add him into Green Lantern. But they didn't just add him in, they turned him into an anti-character. They turned him into a real human being.
It made him a much more interesting, unique character that wasn't a Batman knockoff.
Green Lantern in particular was very much a straight arrow, kind of a super cop type character.
You really had the right and left opinions going on there, and they were able to argue out social positions.
He was the balance to the squeaky clean heroes that the rest of the DC universe pretty much was.
It was Green Arrow's job to say, hey, knock knock, you may think that's right, but you have to think about it just a little bit more. Maybe it's not.
He just goes into these rants, and he's always getting into fights with everybody about, social and political issues.
The Green Team pairing was a natural fit, and they applied their unique perspectives on the social and political issues of the time.
Oliver Queen didn't just fight against the Joker and the Penguin. He fought against racism. He fought against homelessness. He fought against political corruption. I mean, those are the battles that I want to fight.
I didn't plan on giving any solutions to these problems. I was not and am not that smart. I did think there was some value in making people aware of it.
We kind of agreed among ourselves that we're not in a position to solve these problems, but to discuss them.
Green Arrow dealt with the first drug abuse and teen drug abuse storyline in the 70s when his kid sidekick Speedy Roy wound up being a heroin junkie. And they didn't really tackle stuff like that in the comics up until that point.
I got a letter from a drug addict, you're not going to believe this, who said he stopped doing drugs because of that comic book. I mean, what do you say? It's incredible.
The idea that a comic book came out that could deal with those issues, that could show someone, a superhero dealing with racism or drug use or problems like that, blew people's minds back then.
It's not just about saving somebody who's in a burning building, but trying to find and save the people who might be slowly dying because of hunger. That's exciting.
And it was different, and it really was jostling.
We knew we were pushing the envelope. I mean, that was the idea of comic books as a respectable medium was pretty far out in those days.
I have to give Denny credit for changing the face of the comic book business. We now talk about that stuff all the time. If people say, well, you know, relevant Green Lantern and Green Arrow wasn't that important, you know, we do that all the time. We say, not before Green Lantern and Green Arrow you didn't.
That whole era of what Denny O'Neil was doing with Neil Adams was what defined the character for generations to come. And nobody can really surpass that to me in my mind.
The Green Lantern, Green Arrow comics were so popular that by the early 80s, Oliver Queen received his own title for the first time, a mini-series written by Mike Barr.
Mike Barr addressed the question of, what if you give him his money back? Does that change the mission? So he gave him, you know, temporarily gave him millions of dollars, gave him his fortune back. The situation became, I can't really solve these problems with money. I'm doing the right thing by, you know, by really taking it to the streets and by putting myself out there and not just throwing money around.
The unstable atmosphere of the mid-80s brought a shift to comic books in both content and style. In response to the overwhelming success of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns and Alan Moore's Watchmen, DC turned to writer-artist Mike Grell to update Oliver Queen in the miniseries The Longbow Hunters,
which was a much grittier, more adult, more sort of urban hunter take on the character and having very little to do with the superhero aspect of it. And it was a phenomenal success.
He changed his look to a hood. He became sort of like a sword and sorcery character, kind of an urban hunter.
He's usually a little left of center, but you know, if you look at the Mike Grell run, he started leaning a little more right of center.
Grell did away with things like the boxing glove arrow and all the trick arrows and whatnot, and really kind of boiled the character down to his bare essentials in terms of archery.
Even though it's beautiful and I love it, I think Longbow Hunters is, you know, a really important work. Grell's run was the darkest superhero run maybe ever in anything.
The Longbow Hunters led to the first regular monthly Green Arrow series. Grell continued for several years before turning the creative reins over to Chuck Dixon and Kelly Puckett.
Chuck is all about the street-level urban hunter guy. Kelly Puckett's Green Arrow was just going out there and doing the job.
By the mid-90s, interest in Green Arrow had waned, and his series was dipping in sales. In issue number 101, the Archer took his final bow.
The idea was, why don't we just take him off stage for a couple of years? But we still need a Green Arrow. We still want there to be somebody like that in the DC Universe.
That someone was none other than Oliver's long-lost son, Connor Hawke, who became the new Green Arrow.
Connor took over the book, and Connor took over the feature for a few years. And it was very successful. I mean, Connor really made a mark for himself as the new Green Arrow. But that Oliver Queen role of the knee-jerk liberal activist, political activist, that's not something that Connor filled. And so there was just a, you know, as writers started to miss Oliver a little bit more and started to see that we kind of wish we had him around, there was a movement to bring him back.
People don't realize Ollie was dead. He was gone. He'd been gone for a number of years, not just a 6-month period where they were going to bring him back quickly.
The new millennium saw the resurrection of Oliver Queen at the hands of acclaimed filmmaker Kevin Smith and artist Phil Hester.
I didn't really have grander aspirations than just bringing back the Oliver Queen that everybody knew and loved. And there are huge Connor fans out there in the world, but, you know, Green Arrow is Oliver Queen.
Our first poster for the series was Welcome to the Resurrection, because he was coming back.
Kevin Smith's story made Green Arrow the #1 selling title at DC Comics. To follow up on that success, DC hired best-selling novelist Brad Meltzer. Oliver's resurrection gave him a new lease on life and a new perspective on what mattered to him most, his family.
Green Arrow felt more like a father to me in Brad's arc than he ever had been before.
He's a father to his own child. He's a father figure to Roy. He's a husband to Dinah. And he's a bastard to all of them.
With his son Connor, an ex-sidekick Roy, an ex-girlfriend the Black Canary, and a new ward, Mia Dearden, a former teen prostitute, the Green Arrow had his hands full with complex relationships.
He's also very protective. He's in his relationship with Mia and Connor. You don't want to mess with him. You don't want to get between him and his kids because he will take you out.
Meltzer's successful run, DC hired a new writer, Judd Winnick, who wrote the series until 2007 and took Ollie back to his activist roots.
I've been involved in AIDS activism and AIDS education for a number of years, almost 12, 13 years at this point. So for me it made a lot of sense that the issue of AIDS would be a perfect subject for Green Arrow.
Having Mia wind up with HIV was, you know, almost a natural course of events because of her past. It would be almost impossible for her to not and wound up with some sort of consequences.
And this wouldn't be about her necessarily dealing with the illness. It would be more about the fact that her lack of dealing with the illness. So much is written and so much is seen about people who are dying from AIDS. And there are very, very few stories of people who are living with it. And in this case, she's beyond living with it. She's a superhero. And I really wanted to create an HIV-positive superhero who, that her HIV status was the least of her character.
We actually had a very important scene where Mia is going to join the Teen Titans, and she's very forthright about who she is. And it's not something she's ashamed anymore, but understands it's part of her life, that she's HIV positive, that she's learned to deal with it, and everybody around her has to learn how to deal with it too. Important message to be told in that story.
These things are important. Comics they're a very dangerous medium. They're a very kinetic and very fast medium that can get to these stories quicker than film can.
After years of fighting society's battles as a costume vigilante, Oliver Queen took a more conventional approach.
He had no interest in doing anything other than this. He was going to run for mayor, become mayor, fix the city, and get out.
Oliver Queen is a political character first and foremost when you see him. So having him jump into politics, I'm amazed no one did it a long time ago.
He is the character who would care the most about what was going on in politics, and so he was a logical choice, and we just went with it. He felt that the only way he could do something really big to save the city he loved was to not be the superhero for 5 minutes and actually do the job in a more conventional way.
Now all of a sudden he's put in a position of authority. How do you do it? How do you work with the machine that you've been fighting against for so long? How do you deal with that and still be the vigilante?
Suddenly he's the man, and he's actually chasing the man. As the mayor, he's trying to get rid of Green Arrow, and it works perfectly.
The fun part about Green Arrow that we like to do, because we're saying a lot of good things about him, we always like the one character flaw that we do have in our comic character is that he's a bit of a womanizer, which I think also is something that a lot of people enjoy reading about him, and he constantly gets himself in trouble with the women around him.
He's much more a James Bond type character, a love him and leave him kind of guy in that respect, and that's been an important part of his relationship with the other heroes as well, specifically Black Canary, who's his longtime on-again, off-again girlfriend.
These are two people who kick open doors together, beat people up together, so they have a lot in common, a lot of shared goals. It helps in any relationship.
They were together, then they broke them apart, and they were together again, and we keep on breaking them apart. And this particular point, we're actually bringing them to a point where we're actually going to have a wedding between Green Arrow and Black Canary coming up this year. So that's something we've been building towards, but naturally, in any sort of comic book story, it's never that simple.
It's one of the longest relationships in comics. There's some big ones out there, there's some more famous ones out there, but they've actually been doing this dance for close to 30 or 35 years.
They've been dating since the Neil Adams era. And so it's about time they got married, I think, maybe, yeah.
After 7 decades on the comic book page, the last 30 years have seen our hero become a little more animated. He started in the 70s with his one and only appearance in the Super Friends cartoon. He became a force to be reckoned with in 2004's Justice League Unlimited and was featured regularly in the Saturday morning hit The Batman. In 2006, he made his first ever live-action portrayal on Smallville with actor Justin Hartley behind the bow.
I think Justin Hartley nails Green Arrow perfectly. I mean, there's that brashness, that sort of cockiness, but not to the point where you want to smack him, but right up to the edge.
I didn't realize that was such a fascinating subject.
We were talking for quite a while about bringing on a DC character and having an extended stay. We ended up with Green Arrow, which I admit at first I was a little leery of, because I thought Green Arrow could go either way. I mean, if we end up with a guy running around in a Robin Hood outfit with a jaunty cap with a feather in it, we're kind of screwed. But luckily, the costume department came up with this great outfit based on a later version of the Green Arrow outfit where he has a hood instead of, the classic jaunty cap. The thing that's really different between the Green Arrow character and the other DC characters that Clark has come across is that Green Arrow is a fully formed hero.
He represents a viewpoint that wouldn't otherwise be in the show.
Let me tell you something, when I'm out on the streets, I'm protecting people, all right? I got much bigger things to worry about, like staying alive.
It was great to actually have a character that we could bring in to start to open Clark's eyes to the bigger picture. That, you know, there's a lot more trouble in the world than just, you know, your backyard in Smallville.
To have a character come in and say, the world's gray, and you have to really think about what is going to ultimately be for the good of the world versus for the evil of the world. Just giving Clark that challenge was something that we had sort of been dying to do for several seasons.
As a writer of Green Arrow and someone who's been living with the character for a number of years, I really have had a kick on seeing him on Smallville. It's answered a lot of questions which people often pose to the character about having a guy running around shooting bows and arrows actually be a hero. And I think it took seeing him as a live-action character for people to actually get that. Go to hell.
You first. We liked it because it's a counterpoint to Lex and Clark. It's a really good triangle with those three.
Clark Kent is a smart guy. He does understand all of the issues. He sees all the sides. He doesn't take sides. I think he respects that Oliver Queen takes sides.
We really took his essence and brought him pretty directly into Smallville. The character that he was, he fit beautifully into what we were already doing. We didn't have to manipulate it or change it or alter who he was at all.
When you're bringing a new character into a ongoing series, you know, you want to make sure they can plug into as many characters on the show as possible.
Oliver Queen develops a relationship with Lois Lane. A love interest, I would say. They have a fondness for each other. They become boyfriend, girlfriend.
Here goes nothing.
So when we see Green Arrow have a relationship with Lois Lane, we almost automatically know that's not going to work out. Because he hasn't grown up enough, he hasn't evolved enough, he hasn't been through enough processes.
Better luck next time, Hood.
It's just a flirtation.
Green Arrow's Smallville storyline reached its pinnacle when Oliver Queen brought some of DC Comics' greatest heroes together in the episode Justice.
He comes to Smallville looking for people to join him in his I would call it, quest for goodness.
Characters like Cyborg and Green Arrow and Flash and Aquaman, characters that we know and love to be considered some of our mainstays. It's great to see them exposed in another manner so that they hopefully can achieve some level of status as well in the mass media.
Come on, boys. Let's go save the world.
Nearly 70 years of history behind him, Green Arrow has firmly established himself as an integral part of the DC Comics universe. What will the future bring for the Social Crusader?
I actually want to be surprised where Green Arrow goes. I want to be surprised on Smallville. I want to be surprised when the next writer comes up with something that I didn't expect or think I wanted.
Whether it's in the comic book, whether it's in the TV show, I don't care where Green Arrow goes as long as he's true to himself, and that is the ultimate superpower that Oliver Queen has.
I don't think you want to get what you ask for. You want to get something you didn't know was coming. Like a boxing glove arrow in the face.
Since 1941, Green Arrow has provided some of the most entertaining and important storylines in comic book history. Whether trapped on an island, fighting social ills, running Star City as its mayor, or even returning from beyond the grave, Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, has done it all. He's been the #1 selling comic book character, held his own in animation, and become a star on primetime television. He is the Emerald Archer, a superhero for our time.